channel intros are boring, which is why I don't have one. And today I'm coming up with one on the spot right now. I don't have anything to say other than today's the day. You know what I'm saying? Anywho, today's Master Study Friday, which means that I'm pretty much taking what I consider to be a masterpiece work of art, and I'm going to try my best to replicate it. So today's masterpiece is a background image from the anime Frieren. I've not seen, I'm kind of embarrassed to say, I've not seen many animes before, but I recently started watching Frieren, and I was just blown away by the amount of art in every single scene. Cut scenes that probably could have been throwaways seem to have these backgrounds that came to life. I'm not sure the story behind the process of how these background images were made, aside from a little bit of information about who made it. I guess the art from a studio called Studio Wyeth. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Y, no, W, Y, W, Y-E-T-H. W-Y-E-T-H, Wyeth. That's how you spell it. That's how I'm pronouncing it. So anyways, one of the reasons I picked this one is because I really don't have... I just don't have as much time today to do a fully rendered image like I was hoping to do on Fridays. And maybe this is just something I'm finding out through the process. I'm going to have to start budgeting out time to really get these done. But for today, I just, it's 10:45 right now. I'm hoping to get this finished and pushed out by the end of the day to keep up with this daily schedule that I'm kind of setting for myself. Also, you may notice if you've watched the other videos that I've had before this one, the microphone quality is a little bit different. So for my birthday, my brother got me a gift card, and I was able to take that and put it towards a better microphone that wasn't just a couple of holes and wires attached to my headphones with the Bluetooth speakers, or like my phone audio. I think I used at one point, maybe. I can't remember. The past few days have been a bit of a blur. But thank you to him. So I'm not going to stall anymore. Just going to dive right into what I was able to get done today. So again, I was hoping to be able to do a fully rendered image. I'm definitely not going to be able to do that right away. I think in a few weeks' time on Fridays, I might be able to start getting those done. But for now, I really just wanted to understand the structure underneath this image, get an idea of where certain lines are coming from and why. I'm really just starting out by trying to figure out what the proportions are on the canvas. This is a 1920 by 1080p image, so I've got the dimensions for that, but a little bit larger. So what I was able to do is just split it up in half and then start finding the thirds based on a little bit of math. And then as I went through, I was able to break it down even further into quarters in some cases. But a lot of that doesn't come into play until later when I'm looking at that reference image and trying to figure out where some of the lines are coming from and why. Speaking of some of those lines, I put down what I thought was the most important line first. And I was trying to figure out where it was connecting to, where it was coming from. And that's really just that big main line all the way cutting through, where you have this big winding path that cuts up and into the hill. And none of these lines are being measured from the source material. So I'm not going in and figuring out how many pixels wide or what the real dimension is for some of these lines. So I'm just eyeballing it and taking what it feels to my eye and then putting that on my canvas and learning from any mistakes that I might have made or seeing what I got right too. So we'll take a look at some of that towards the end when we have another comparison at the end here. And so what I'm doing here, I was looking at the plants in the foreground and trying to find where those arches were, where the splits were, where they were intersecting with some of these lines, the halfway lines, the some of the third lines. I almost called this a paper, but it's really not a paper. So that's what I'm looking for here. And I'll speed this up to see if I can get to the next portion. So it was tough trying to figure out where to actually get started with some of these pieces inside the piece, especially the building. So I just picked what I thought looked like a center line in the page where the corner of this building is jutting out, and then slowly over time building out and trying to get the proportion right. Proportion is something that I've struggled with a lot, and so it's something that I wanted to work on with this, just being mindful of how big the shapes are that I'm making, how big they are compared to some of the other shapes that I'm drawing in, and especially the angles that these are put on. Since these are supposed to be in the background, they have a little bit of a tilt to them in order to try and give some perspective. And it's a very subtle line. It's a very, very subtle angle. And these are the subtle angles that I was saying I had a hard time with. So it felt like good practice for that, for sure. And it's at this point here where I notice a lot of these buildings in the background, they're lined up. I forget if it's the pitch of the roof or if it's a feature on the roofs, but they all follow this pattern and this structure of radiating lines coming out of the top left portion of the page. So here's where I was trying to figure out where that was and how to proportionally draw those buildings and hillscapes in the background there. I also noticed here where some of the leaf clusters were in the top left corner of the page while I was looking up in that direction. And sort of trusting my gut and trusting my eye on how close they really were to the edge of the canvas and figuring out what the shape and structure was for those. It's also at this point where I noticed this little house that's poking up within the tree line that I never really saw on the first go around. When I picked this out, I didn't even see it there. But it's reconfirming some of my suspicions that I had about this one line being. I'm trying to find the right word for it. A load-bearing line? Is that something? Can a line be load-bearing? Is that a thing? For me, it felt like it was. It felt like it was so important to the rest of the composition here that if this line wasn't there, it wouldn't be the same picture. And all these different intersecting points. Yeah. And here we're moving back to that main part of the town right in the center of this piece, and I'm just going in and, like I was saying, trying to figure out some of these proportions by comparing each shape to the shape around it, trying to figure out how big it can or can't be, especially with some of these trees, some of the forms of the buildings, these panel walls, the ways that they're subdivided into one another, almost using those as a grid to measure out how big the other panels can be in the other buildings. And I spent a good portion of time just seeing if I could figure out the proportions of those buildings and put those down. Now we're getting pretty close to the end of what I got done today. The rest of the time spent was just done on plants, tidying up, seeing if there was anything I could clean that needed cleaning, and then checking to see what it looked like without the structure layer underneath. And again, this isn't a fully rendered image. This isn't it's just a bit of a sketch, really. Having fun, seeing if I could find the structure underneath and seeing if I could see what the artist was seeing when they made this, hopefully. Trying to understand how they were able to divide it up and then compare that with what I did. So here we're slowly transitioning and showing the difference between what I was able to make and what the original piece looked like. And I'm just doing this to figure out where I went right, where I went wrong, what looked off. I mean, the whole center part looked like it was shifted up and to the right on accident. And the town is supposed to be much closer to the center of the piece here. But I was very happy with how it came out. So to go in and try and find what I didn't see at first, I just took the pen and started drawing in these lines to see, okay, here's the real center line. So that didn't go on the corner of the building like I expected it would, but it wasn't too far off from that either. And I had a lot of fun when I was splitting this up into thirds too, finding these little points of interests, I called them, where parts where there didn't have to be anything, the artist added just these little bitty details here and there, like this tree along the tree line, this one that juts out from all the others, and I tried to figure out if there's anything else on the opposite side. And there is this tiny divide in the lower foreground bushes that splits it up, gives it a little bit of dimension, a little bit of depth, a little bit of interest, and shows you that path behind. Going back to that tree too, I was splitting it up into the horizontal thirds, and I noticed that that tree in the long, the tree line intersects perfectly with that one piece there. I think what was going on with this one here, I think the bottom portion was much more subtle, but it divides the whole thing. You know, I'm not even going to make anything up. I don't know what was happening with that bottom third. And then that center line for the piece was where some of the roofs were intersecting, that red roof on the right. And there was a little bit of an ebb and a flow. Now that I'm looking at it, a bit of a balance between the amount of green and the amount of blue in the halfway marks. What am I doing here? Splitting it up into quarters. Was there anything interesting in the quarters? No, there was kind of. So again, those that foreground bush line, it looks like the first quarter is where the peak of that one is. So finding these little intersecting points, these little spots where these lines come together and they meet, something funky happens. Something interesting happens. And no matter where you look on the page, no matter where you look in the background, there's always something happening, except for the top right part. And that's really just acting as a way for your eyes to rest after looking at everything else that's going on underneath. You find yourself looking at these little details and then wandering back up to the top right, where maybe there's a bit of peace, a little bit of calm, a little bit of blue. So that's what I like to think, at least. And then here I'm desaturating this whole image so I can draw in some of those lines and some of those intersecting points again. I'll speed that up to see if I can get that quicker for you. So here are those lines that are... I thought they were coming from different points and going to different points, but it looks like that main line starts at the halfway and then goes all the way down in the bottom right corner. And then some of those smaller lines find origins in other parts of the piece. And again, I'm just pointing out these little intersecting points that I spotted. That tree, the spire, the bushes in the front. And trying to figure out where they were and why. So that's today. It wasn't a complete rendering like I was hoping to do. Again, maybe in the future I'll be able to do something like that. I'm feeling a lot more comfortable getting these lines down. I mean, this drawing itself, the sketch of the background that I did, that only took about 40 minutes or so. So if I'm expecting to do with what I can do now, maybe it'll only take 3 hours or so. 3 hours is still a lot. But for the future, I wouldn't mind doing that for y'all. And maybe I'll have a lot more fun doing it. So thank you again for stopping by. And today's a lot shorter, and I appreciate you all stopping in. Thanks.